In this video, I will talk about several game mechanics and items such as chaining, hypers, bees, and bombs, which are at the center of Daioujou's scoring system. But first, let's start with a basic screen presentation. I'll go over the really basic stuff. This is your hitbox. If you hit a bullet or run into a flying enemy, you will die. Here is the chain gauge. Here is the hyper gauge. Here you can see your chain counter, combo meter, or whatever you want to call it. At the very top of the screen you can see your score. At the bottom of the screen, in the bottom left corner, you can see your bombs. The same way it was in the previous Dodonpachi game, scoring in Daioujou is mostly about achieving and properly maintaining a high combo chain. The point value of the enemies you destroy and some items you collect are multiplied by this number. Basically, your mission is to get this number as high as you can for each stage. Chaining is determined by your chain gauge. Every time you kill an enemy, it will go up, else it will go down at constant speed. If it goes all the way down, your chain breaks and you will be sad. This means you need to kill enemies carefully with a certain rhythm in order to maintain your chain. It is interesting to notice that when you kill an enemy with your shot, you fill completely your chain gauge. But when you kill it with your laser, you only fill it up to 50%. But you can maintain your chain if you keep lasering a big enemy. In this case, instead of going down, your chain gauge will stay at around 10%. Hypers. If you play for score, they are at the very center of the gameplay. Managing your hypers and using them at the most efficient time is really important. And in order to do that, you need to understand how they work. When you grab an hyper, you can see how many hyper you have in stock here. You can have up to 5 hypers in stock. When you have at least 1 hyper in stock, you won't be able to see how many bombs you have in stock anymore. Instead, you will see this message. Using an hyper will make your shot and your laser bigger and stronger. It gets even proportionally to the number of hyper you use at the same time. The chain gauge will go down slower, which means it is easier to chain. Activating your hyper, fill your chain gauge for an instant. This can be used in order to make the chaining easier or possible on several sections. In order to get an hyper, you need to fill your hyper gauge. When your hyper gauge is full, an hyper medal should drop from the top of the screen, but there are some exceptions. If you are in hyper mode, the hyper won't drop. But it will drop as soon as you leave hyper mode. Also, the hyper won't drop during a boss fight if you still have at least 1 bomb in stock. If you want to make an hyper drop during a boss fight, you can use all the bombs you have left in stock. When you fill an hyper gauge but you are in one of the 2 situations mentioned before, instead of making an hyper drop, you will get what we call an hyper cancel. As you can see, all the bullets on the screen disappeared at the very moment the hyper gauge was filled. This happens every time you fill an hyper gauge but the hyper can't drop. This can be especially useful on substage sections and boss fights. Some other things can be said about the hyper items. Once they appear from the top of the screen, if you don't pick them up, they will slowly go down until they reach the bottom of the screen, and then they will go up until they exit the screen by the top. Grabbing them while preserving your chain can be tricky at times, and you will often plan the way you pick them up. Another thing is, if you activate an hyper while there is an hyper item on the screen, the hyper item will turn into a 10,000 point star and the hyper will forever be lost. How to fill the hyper gauge? The hyper gauge can be filled by killing enemies. Killing small enemies or popcorns with your shot give more hypers than killing them with your laser, as you can see. This means you can regulate the amount of hyper you get by deliberately choosing to kill the popcorn enemies with your shot or laser. You can also gain hyper by using your laser on big enemies and bosses. You can gain even more hyper if you point blank them because your aura is also touching them. This means you can also regulate the amount of hyper you gain from bosses by dealing damage with your shot instead of your laser, for example. It is also important to know that players will instantly receive 30% of a full hyper gauge if they lose a life. And finally, the last way to fill your hyper gauge is by collecting the bees. Bees play a very important role in Daioujou and are worth 1000 points multiplied by the number of hits in the current combo chain. The bees are hidden, but you can uncover them using the head of your laser. If a player can collect all 10 bees items in a stage without dying, the last item will have an additional ×2 multiplier. Collecting all the bee items in a stage will also increase their default value by 1000 for every following stage. You can fill the hyper gauge by collecting a bee item while having at least a 20 hit chain. Collecting a bee item with 20 to 39 chain will fill 3% of the hyper gauge. Having a 40 to 59 hit chain will give 6%. And so until the player has 200 hits, which fill 30% of the hyper gauge. It's not really important to remember any of these numbers. If you want to optimize your hyper management and gain as much hyper as possible, most of the time you want to grab the bees with at least a 200 hit combo. But when you mess up and break your chain, it is nice to have a good idea of how much hyper you will be getting for each bees in order to recover from your mistake. However, collecting a bee item while in hyper mode won't give you any hyper gauge. That's why, at many points in the game, you want to collect bees just before activating your hypers or just after the hyper ends. Another really important thing to know is that when you fill your hyper gauge by collecting a bee, there is no leftover. Here is an example. If your hyper gauge is filled at 80% and you grab a bee with a 700 hit combo, according to what I said earlier, you should gain around 30% of hyper gauge. But in this case, you will fill the hyper gauge, make an hyper drop, and start the new gauge at 0%, which means you only gain 20% of hyper gauge. That's why, unless you rotate your stage that way, usually you want to grab the bee items right after filling an hyper gauge, rather than just before. Depending on which ship you choose and how many lives you've lost, you are given a certain number of bombs. As I mentioned previously, I am going to use the Type A expert ship, which means you start the game with only one bomb and you cannot hold more than one bomb on that first life. Then, if you die, you will have 2 bombs, unless you die while using an hyper. In this case, you will have only 1 bomb. After your first death, you can carry a maximum of 2 bombs. The bomb is different if you are pressing the laser button or not during the activation. If you use your bomb while being unfocused, your bomb will cancel all the bullets into little stars, and you will kill most of the popcorn enemies on the screen. If you use your bomb while being focused, you will shoot a huge laser in front of you, which deals a big amount of damage. Bombs items are pretty rare in the game. After you destroy the ship that carries them, they stay on the screen for a while, following a predictable rectangular movement, then they disappear from the screen after a while. If you collect a bomb while your stock is already full, instead of seeing the number of bombs displayed, you will see this message: maximum bonus, which means for every frame outside of boss fight, you will earn a bonus point while this message is displayed. For each life lost and bomb used, this bonus decreases. So if you want to maximize your score, it is best not to die and bomb at all if possible. Rank. Dodonpachi Daioujou also has a hidden rank system, one that makes the game harder as the rank increases. Rank is only increased by using hypers, and the amount it increases is proportional to the level of hyper used. Rank can be only decreased by bombing during hypers or losing a life. Finally, the star items and the medals may be flashy, but they are almost worthless. You can have fun collecting them, don't let them distract you. You can also try to get better cancel on bosses, but this is not worth a lot of points in comparison to chaining or bee collection. I may have forgotten several things, and some of my explanation may not be very clear. If this is the case, feel free to ask for further explanation in the comment. Any form of feedback is welcome. I hope this little guide will be helpful to people who want to learn about Daioujou scoring. Be prepared for my next video about my stage run route. À la prochaine!